Let's imagine you have a task to write a global state for this component. So here you have two counters which should listen to same state. So it's obvious, yeah, button 1 increments it and so on and so forth. Well, the first naive and native approach could be, I don't know, let's say we have a global state, which is something like count 0. Here inside counter we have a function increment, which is what? Incrementing our state. We say global state, our count should be +1, and it should work, right? Like this is how JavaScript works, everything inside closure and so on. Let's say global state count, we have zeros now, so it works. And we have button on click, which is a React function, and we say what? We say increment. Let's see. It doesn't work. What if we debug it and say console log global state count, and see what's going on inside console? Inside console it works. Like I clicked 3 times, I see 3 numbers. What if I click here? So both buttons are using global state, let's say global variable, but somehow it doesn't make React reactive. Okay, maybe we should think in another way. So it is React, right? So we should use hooks if it's React. Yeah, and we cannot use this just use state because it will be internal, local. We should use global state, right? But use it like a hook maybe. So use global state, right? Global state hook, which is doing what? Just sharing our state for our components. Here we say state and set state, which will be just React set state. Yeah, with initial value of 0 because it's our initial value of our count. And for example, I return this state and set state in a cortege, so it can be used like count set count from here, and also increment, right? Const increment is a function that actually increments my count. It takes previous count and just say previous count +1. So here increment, here is a count, here is use state, and let's see. Wait, what? So they are using global hook, yeah, each counter, because here the only one counter, but here I just copy and paste 2 counters. Why they are not in sync? Why they are not synchronous? Maybe because each time what is going on? Each time I create a counter, it inside this hook uses this one hook, single hook, creates an internal, unique means different, use state. Okay, so we use hooks. At least something is working. Yeah, counter is incrementing. What could be our next step? Let's think. What if we use internal, local use state. Yeah, state doesn't matter. What if we could use also like global hook, but maybe global state, something which is not local inside components, some not even, I don't know, state, global state. How could we name it? What if we name it a context? Something like global context. Is there something inside React? There is context, just React context. So what if we do not use this state, but we say that I want to use global state context. Here I say React create context, give some initial value, which will be count 0, and set count would be any function. And somehow I need to use this context. So not this global state hook, but I can use it with React use context, right? It is a hook inside React. And I use this global set context, global state context, right? Increment is the same, but somehow I should use this inside the provider, right? Here, I should say that global state context has its own provider. Let's make it first like this. Here, and inside provider, I have value that I'm providing into this context, which is an object of something. Wait, somewhere I should change it, and here actually use count and set count, which is a normal React use state, yeah, with the initial value 0. So then I could provide into the context a count and set count, and probably it should work if I didn't have typo. So let's see. Wow, that works. So the task is actually done. Well, kinda, let's say, because let's imagine I have a working application. Inside working application, I could have any number of components. For example, some dummy components that does nothing. Dummy component, but just showing how many times it rendered. So I say const render count, and I use React hook useRef just to store value into something that is out of React lifecycle, which is a hint in the future. Something outside React lifecycle. I store it 1 because first I render it. It is already should be value, not starting from 0 because it is already rendered. So this component can just show what how many times it's rendered. Yeah, and I said because 1 it is already rendered, so it is 1. And I just say return, so to make it component, dummy component, right? And number of renders, render count current. But somehow I also need to connect to it updates. Like if everything is updating, like parent component is updating, I should catch it. And this can be done with the help of useEffect. Inside useEffect, there is a function. Everything is pretty straightforward and standard. And I just increment it here, current plus equals 1. So yeah, and I should show it. What's going on with this highlighting? Huh? List element, and here is dummy component without this. So let's see. 1 is correct, and here is kinda correct. So only this counter and this counter is using this global state. This dummy counter uses nothing. So why it is updating? But we are senior developers. We know that inside React there is also a hook. There is hooks for everything inside React. So there is hook to make this component, dummy memoized component. So memoized dummy component is something not more than React.memo dummy component. And that's it, right? I say it here, memoized dummy component, and check. Right, so correct. Dummy component is updating, memoized component is not updating. We solved an issue. Well, kinda, I guess. Again, I wanted to say it in one word. Because, okay, we have production ready application. Should we wrap every component into memoized? Because we introduced provider, because we introduced some context and two of components are listening to this state. I don't want to do this. So there should be, I don't know, something something. So maybe let's start over again. I have to store my state somewhere out of React lifecycle. I have to be able to listen to changes of this something, and I have to update my components when I hear that something is changed, if I listen to it. Listen, change, wait. Isn't it almost the same like a pattern, architectural pattern called observer? So what if I create an observer somewhere out of React lifecycle? But how is it possible? How is it possible? So there are two magic things, actually even one magic thing in React that almost no one knows and almost no one tells you about this. What I want to escape? I want to escape that updating counter makes updating the whole application, and I should do something hacky actually. What if I say then I don't need provider? Yeah, like talking to AI. Okay, don't be conservative. Be conservative, I don't need provider. So I don't need provider, I don't need this use state even, because it makes what? It makes renders to me. Let me think, what should I do next? Because see, I removed provider, I removed state here. Wait, shouldn't even I have a blank number here? Wait, what if I change it here? I have it here. What's that? Do you mean that I still can read from context even without wrapping my whole app into provider? Looks like that. Looks like a perfect candidate to fit into observer pattern. Let's do this. So then I create not a context, but something even fancier. Let's say I create a store, which is just an observer pattern. Yep, I create a store with internal state, which is a count of our counter. I create a getter, which just give me state. I create setter, just get next value and set it into state. And I just return this to, let's say, almost like a cortege. Get state and set state. I should create a global state, not state, but global state context, which is absolutely the same React create context with the initial value of what? Of our observer, which is create store, which is store fabric, let's say. And now, if I use this, I could say that give me just this state and let me change it, mutate. So here I say that my count is the same, get state. And now I have this 0. So everything is passing, right? Nothing is broken. If I change it here, I have 42. If I state 0, it's 0. So I implemented my observer, almost, kinda, let's say. I have getter, setter, I read from it inside React, and more or less everything works. Yeah, but not everything, because I hit increment, nothing changes. Yeah, because nothing is actually calling this initial count to be changed. Like no one is calling this initial set state. Why? Like I showed in the first implementation, let's say, making code inside React component doesn't make it reactive. So our count is not reactive and our set count is also not reactive. Nothing is updating. How to solve this? Well, first we should finish with the creation of observer pattern. How? I should create not just a state, but list of listeners, new set. Setter, getter are the same, but inside setter, let's say I add an invocation of each listener that is actually listens to this change. So each time I hit set state, listeners are called. Easy. And also subscribe to these changes is a function that actually takes this listener and subscribe it to the listeners. Easy. We should remove this, almost like in useEffect. We will be actually using it inside useEffect. So we delete this listener because not each set state should trigger this mutation. But so without this, there will be closures that will lose this binding of our variable and our setter. With this, let's say cleanup function, we will not be in the problem. If I'm not correct, please correct me in the comments below. Subscribe. To make this component actually reactive, we should use React. And React means lifecycle. And lifecycle means changing it, some information, some state, and we should use internal state. So we say count, set count inside React is just a function of useState, a hook with initial value of 0. But we should somehow mutate this hook. How? Well, with React useEffect. And from the first step and from the beginning of this step, I said that we are actually mutating numbers even if they are not mutating our real DOM. The first step we saw in the console that each time I change this variable is actually changing because it's just a JavaScript, nothing more. But with React there is lifecycle that is not triggered and not updating these numbers. So to update these numbers, I should listen to get state. Each time it updates, it should tell me that state was updated. So I say that here I should use unsubscribe function, which is vice versa subscribe. And here is the place I mutate my state, get state. I return it because it is already a function of cleanup. So I implemented this observer pattern here. What else? Set count is working, but not set count, but I should trigger actually this set state out of context. And there is no previous values, just count. So I take count out of useState and take set state out of context just to make it happen. And now I expect that even without any providers, even with this dummy component that should not be triggered when my counter is doing something because I'm inside the biggest application, for example, in my life, even with counter using it internal inner state, it also listens to this context like initial value, but we made this context initial value as a observer. So with this help, we may say that please update our counter. It updates both counters and do not trigger any updates for neighbors. Isn't it a magic? So you may say that, well, it is magic. Why don't we wrap this into some hook that gives us count and set state, and we could use it like use state, use context, you name it. I would tell you there is a library called Jotai, and this idea about atom libraries, atom sets, atom state managers. There is an excellent book because it's the only one authored by author of Jotai. I highly recommend it and leave a link down below. You definitely should read it, each step, because each step described here is better, 10 times better described in that book compared to different state managers, compared to Zustand, Redux, and explained in details, even with something else that React has but not shown here, in matter of simplicity of an example. I guess that's it. See it, say it, sort it.